And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, the Indiana Hoosiers beat the Austin Peay Generals 102-76 in a game that featured one of the most lights-out, ridiculous shooting displays in the second half by an IU team maybe that we've ever seen. I don't know. We're going to go to Will for some stats here in a little bit, and he'll perhaps let us know about that. But it was a ridiculous shooting performance by Indiana, which we will break down on tonight's episode of the Assembly Call. And if you're joining us live right now, I do want to remind you all that we do have the live chat back rolling again. So if you're on the desktop, it'll be right over there to the right of the video. And if you're watching us on mobile, scroll down to the bottom of the page. You can log into the chat. All you need is a free membership to the Assembly Call. If you don't have one yet, go to assemblycall.com/register. It takes about 30 seconds to join. Not only will you get access to the chat, you get access to the halftime report, as well as our content series, the 50 Greatest Hoosiers of All Time. So all of that for your free membership, as well as the ability to participate in the chat. I'm your host, Jared Morris, for the evening, and I will be joined by our normal crew, Ryan Phillips, Andy Bottoms, and Will DeWitt, to break down this IU victory. And for tonight's banner moment, it would be very easy to say the 14 straight shots, whatever, and perhaps one of you guys will break that down. But for me, there was a very subtle moment that happened at the beginning of the second half that suggests to me that this year's team can be different, and it's because of Thomas Bryant. And here's what it is. You know, on the halftime report, I talked about how important it was for Indiana to get off to a good start at the beginning of the second half. And if you watch those halftime reports, you probably feel like it's a broken record, me saying that. But it's such a key for this team, especially in Big Ten play, with how poorly we've started second halves. Well, this second half started out poorly like others have. Austin Peay came right down. They scored on their first two possessions, a 5-0 run, and the second bucket, I believe, was one where they got inside on Bryant, scored, and you could tell that Thomas pissed, and he ran down to the other end of the floor, posted up. Indiana did a nice job of getting him the ball, and he was not going to be denied. He just had one of those looks on his face like, screw it, I am scoring, and he did, and he got a dunk. And I thought it settled Indiana down. And instead of a 5-0 run potentially ballooning a little bit and this becoming more of a game than it needed to be, I thought Thomas Bryant said, enough of this, let's get a stop, let's assert ourselves, and Indiana started to play pretty well from there. And they ended up going on a 7-0 run right away to push it right back out. And that, to me, is a mentality that I don't think Indiana has had these past couple years. A guy that just, when things aren't quite going well, that just says, screw this, I'm making a play, I'm going to do something with my effort, with my enthusiasm, with toughness, make a play, and get us going again. And if we're looking for reasons why this year's team can be better on defense and just better overall, it's a guy like Thomas Bryant who, if this team gets scored on 3 straight times, you know he's going to take it personally, get upset, and do whatever he can do to not allow that to happen. And so I like that mentality. I thought it was a big moment early in the second half. And, of course, we know that the barrage of threes came after that. But I thought that was a really key moment, and it's a sign of what this freshman is going to bring to the team. And it's a mentality that I think this team needs, especially when it gets into the Big Ten season, and you can't allow teams to go on stretches of 3, 4, 5 straight baskets and where you're just in a little bit of a lull, and he helped pull us out of one tonight. Very impressive moment there from Thomas Bryant, and I thought overall he played a good game. We'll break down his performance and everybody else's performance as we go through, but let's go around the horn now and get some opening comments. Andy, we will start with you with your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
It was an interesting game. I tweeted out at one point in the first half, I think, that it felt like a weird combination of the last 2 years' teams where there were head-scratching turnovers on one end and really poor defense on the other, and it was just kind of a weird conglomeration of those couple teams. I thought that really continued. I mean, I felt like I was unnecessarily complaining about not unnecessarily, but I was, throwing cold water on the fire that was burning on the offensive end by complaining about the defense. But toward the end of the game, I tweeted out that I thought this summed up my thoughts about as well as I could. That maybe it's being too hard. I just don't want to see an elite offense undermined by piss poor defense. And the talent level and the talent disparity between IU and Austin Peay was so wide that even the mistakes that they made, not all, Austin Peay can't burn you for every single mistake that they made defensively, but they made, they did they did make them pay for a lot of those mistakes. And I think we felt cautiously optimistic about the defense at times after the Eastern Illinois game. And I think everybody probably lapsed right back into the, oh God, I don't really know how this is going to go mode on defense. And I think they really struggled to keep the ball out of the paint and just struggled in general on that end of the floor. Just recognition, pick and roll defense, pretty much every facet of defense that you can think of. And they did generate a lot of turnovers, and I think the pace at which IU played contributed to that a little bit. So if we're kind of looking at the barometer of how you feel about the team from game to game on the defensive end, I think this was a pretty big step back, probably bigger than any of the 3 games that we've watched so far. But offensively, it was just unbelievable. During that stretch, it just they weren't missing. Obviously, that's exciting, but they were really getting good shots. And not every good shot is going to go in, but they really did a great job of getting good shots, getting good 3-pointers, getting some penetration, and kicking it back out. And so I felt like you kind of got both ends of the spectrum of how good or how frustrating this team might be. The offense on the one hand was just electrifying, and everything that you love to watch about college basketball, and everything that makes you excited about this team. And at the other end, it was everything that makes you hate what you see from a defensive standpoint, and get overly frustrated. So I think fans got their money's worth in attendance. You got to see pretty much the whole package from IU tonight, and we'll see what happens going to playing Creighton on Thursday. But it was definitely a kind of roller coaster performance, which I think is a statement that we used all too many times last season.
Ryan, what's your rant on this evening's performance?
I gotta agree with you, Jared. I think Thomas Bryant just brings something that this team has not had in a long time. It's been at least a couple years, and the attitude is it's not just having a big man, but having a big man that can catch the ball. I mean, you can just dump the ball to him, turn around, and put the ball in the basket. That makes offense so easy, and it takes pressure off everybody else. I mean, it seemed like last year and the year before Indiana had to work so hard just to get baskets. I mean, great offensive team last year, but they had to work hard to get anything because there were no easy baskets. And the ease that Bryant can score with inside is amazing. But the attitude is even more important. I mean, he's just this guy that he almost tells the defense, I'm going right there, you're going to give me the ball, and I'm going to score. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that attitude translates to everybody. You see James Blackman Jr., maybe a little covered, but just fires a 3. I mean, it and nails it because he's just got that confidence, and they just have as a team this confidence. I mean, it really is staggering to see what Brian has done and his attitude. And you saw at one point he picked up his 3rd foul, and Troy Williams was lighting into him on the sidelines, and he didn't get frustrated. He seemed to be nodding along with it, like, okay, yeah, I get it, and Williams was letting him have it, and that kind of attitude. And Marty Mooney tweeted out this week that she'd never seen a more team-centered person than Thomas Bryant, and that attitude plus him knowing that he can just dominate someone at any time and having that knowledge and confidence is irreplaceable. I mean, it's something that you cannot underestimate how important that is. As for the defense and things like that, yeah, it got pretty ugly tonight. But I think these games where you go in knowing you're going to win and knowing you're going to blow the opponent out, sometimes it's hard to keep your focus. And I think at times defensively they lost that. You had a couple of highlight reel Troy Williams dunks, and then on the other end guys were kind of still, in la-la land about that and get beat defensively. So I think that it's hard to judge these games. That's why I tweeted out I wasn't going to judge the team's defense until we see what they do against Creighton. Obviously, as I've said all year, I think it's improved but not fixed. And tonight it didn't look improved at all. But hopefully, this is just a case of an early season game. Monday night, probably, the fans probably all left early, and it just wasn't a game where they were very focused. So hopefully that changes and we see some focus on against Creighton.
By the way, Apex Hoosier in the chat is wishing that you were going to rant on James Blackman Jr.'s defense. And we will get to that because James and Troy sat to start the second half, and I don't think that was a coincidence. But before we do that, let's go over to Will DeWitt. And Will, let's get your stat of the night.
Yeah, my stat of the night, I mean, there's plenty to choose from, but currently I'm going to go with the shooting percentage here in the second half. Looking at the media guide, As I was looking at the last time that the Hoosiers scored 70% from the floor and a half. Was back on January 22nd, the game against Maryland that everybody's still raving about last year. But they shot 72% in that half. Anything higher? Today we shot 80.8%. So perhaps this is the most consistent shooting that we ever had in a half as a program. I'm waiting confirmation from that. I tweeted the IU account. Hopefully they'll let me know. I mean, that's a good stat to know. But nonetheless, still a stellar performance shooting the ball.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. And, really, to me, it calls back to what my old high school coach used to always say, which was that, there's a difference between shooting well and playing well. You can shoot well and mask a lot of deficiencies. And I thought tonight, look, I thought Indiana did a nice job on offense. We talked on the halftime report about how Indiana was leaving three-pointers out there because I thought they were getting good looks and just not making them. And they made all those in the second half. And it was a beautiful thing to see. But, Andy, I want to go to you with this first, and then, Ryan, I want to go to you with it also because I want to talk about Coach Crean because he talked a lot in the offseason about how important defense was and how it's a focus and how playing time is going to be dictated by defense. It's not something that we saw a lot last year, and I think a lot of us were kind of saying, all right, let's wait and see if this will actually happen. Well, in that first half, I thought James Blackman Jr. had a nice first half offensively, but both he and Troy were consistently, losing their man on defense. Troy got beaten backdoor really badly one time. Neither one of those guys really brought the intensity on defense. And to come out at the start of the second half, they both sat. And the two guys who played were Robert Johnson and Colin Hartman, who, when they came in there, they were forcing turnovers, playing really solid defense in the first half. And it seemed to me like a pretty clear sign that defense was being rewarded with who started in the second half. And I took that as a really good sign that Coach Crean meant what he said, that defense was going to dictate playing time, and that if you don't play it, you're going to sit. I liked that. Andy, did you read anything into that? Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good to see as well. I mean, to me, if you're really watching the game and you want to find a guy who knows where to be on defense, both when his guy has the ball and when he doesn't, it would be just sit down and watch Colin Hartman. There were more than one occasion that he was in perfect position on the help side. If Thomas Bryant was out, kind of fronting or playing around to the side of the post player, he was always right there to be behind him and to cut plays off. And so I like it in the sense that Hartman is clearly the guy who gets it from a team defense concept, and even they were playing quite a few bigger lineups as it got into the second half, and he was guarding much smaller players. Austin Peay obviously didn't have a ton of size to begin with, but he did a good job of moving his feet. He got beat a little bit just because there were smaller, quicker guys, but I thought if you just kind of look at guys who get it, to me that's Hartman. Robert Johnson I thought played really well on the ball, so I think it's a good sign that shows that it's important. I think it's frustrating that it's game 2 and you're having to resort to that. But I do think both those guys played really well. And the other guy who is just dialed in times 100 on defense is Yogi at this point. You can really tell in watching him how he's really getting into guys and something he's very much taking pride in this season, and something we saw him take pride in stretches before, but I mean he's just really, really locked in on that end of the floor, diving over the scorer's table. We all took had a collective heart attack, I'm sure, but just he's the other guy to me who really stands out defensively. But a lot of other guys are just getting to, Troy let a guy past him once in the first half and got a really nice block, but that's just because you're 20 times as athletic as the guy that you let get past you. So stuff that works and mistakes that you can erase against Austin Peay, you're not going to erase against a good team as you go through. So I think guys are losing their fundamentals, and then they're kind of reaching on the back end, and against some of these teams that IU plays in the preseason, that's going to work, and sometimes you're really going to pay for it more than they did tonight.
Yeah, and it's not to say that those guys played badly, because, Troy had 14 points, he had 5 assists, 5 boards, he only had the 2 turnovers. I thought he did some nice things. Of course, the reverse dunk is just that every single game reminder that Troy Williams can do things that most other basketball players can't. James did have 20 points, and again, I thought he was effectively aggressive, especially in the first half on offense. The 5 turnovers can't happen. But that turnstile defense, for a team that has so many ways to score, we're not always going to be able to say with Troy and James where they made up for it with scoring, and I thought tonight was an example of that. Ryan, your thoughts on those two guys on the defensive end?
Well, I think that the message clearly has to be that we have guys who can score. We have guys who can provide offense, and if they can't provide defense, also we've got guys on the bench who can also put up numbers. Zeisloft was instant offense tonight after popping his finger out of place. Ugh, that was not fun. I've done that before, so I mean my hands hurt when that happened.
Did you come back and make 4 threes afterwards?
I did not. No, I did. No. There's a story behind that we won't go into. But no, you have guys on the bench who can put points up, and the other starters can make up for your offense. So clearly, offense isn't going to be as important as defense this year. So I think that was a strong message to send. I agree. I thought that James, offensively, I've said this several times, he just has a much more mature game this year. He's smarter. He's kind of playing into the team concept offensively, cutting better, finding open players, things like that. Whereas last year I felt like he was just kind of the guy sitting on the corner waiting for the ball to get to him, and then he'd drive or shoot. But this year I feel like he's really involved in the team concept. We've just got to get him playing defense. I mean, and Troy, again, he's just Troy. I mean, when he does stuff like those dunks and some of his recoveries on defense were impressive, as Andy said, just because of how athletic he is. But, steals and blocks don't always mean you played good defense. In fact, often they mean you played terrible defense and got lucky. Poor defenders get lots of steals in the NBA and in college basketball because they get beaten and then run from behind and knock it out. So it's sort of making up for it, but on that play. But from a play-by-play perspective, you're really not a great defender. And so those two guys just have to focus on keeping their guys in front of them. If you're not a good defender, just focus on not getting beaten and make the guy shoot a jump shot. I mean, that's the easiest way to survive if you're not a good defender, is just do whatever you can to keep the guy in front of you. Back up as much as you can, play him to drive you and let him shoot. And you just want to see both guys calm down on their aggressiveness and stop chasing guys around instead of knowing where they're supposed to be. And Andy's point on Colin Hartman is perfect. He knows exactly where he's supposed to be all the time.
But I tell you what, it's interesting on a game like this where you score 100 points, you win going away, to kind of come on here and feel like we've been critical for the majority of this show. But that's the expectations that we have of this year's Hoosiers, and it's what they're capable of. But certainly we want to enjoy it when this team, scores 100 points and plays as breathtakingly on offense as they did. Because I'll tell you, we all hope for the defensive improvement, and we're all really going to be watching for it this year. It's just after what we saw last year and knowing what the expectations are, we know that defense has to be there. But there are going to be nights when this team doesn't play very good defense, and when they can shoot like this, they're going to be able to win some games. And when I think back to what happened in the second half and what happened tonight offensively, it's not so much the shooting. I mean, look, 16 of 27 from 3 is mind-boggling. It's incredible. It's a reminder of how many talented shooters and shot makers this team has. But what I liked even more than that was the fact that there were 25 assists on the 40 made field goals, which really showed that Indiana, for the most part, did not get lazy offensively. They really, there was a stretch there in the first half. Austin Peay played some zone. Indiana really got lazy and just kind of passed the ball around the perimeter. But for the most part, led by Yogi, they did a really nice job of probing it into the lane, getting wide open shots. Andy, I want to ask you, those are some good numbers. Should we at all be concerned about the free throw rate? I mean, Indiana only shot 10 free throws tonight. That free throw rate of 16.7%. And that's something that we've kind of seen, the team not getting to the line as much, and yet I didn't necessarily think it was a case of not being aggressive, because I thought they penetrated inside a lot. It was almost like they were so quick at getting the ball out and getting good looks, they didn't even give themselves the opportunity to get fouled. What are your thoughts there? Is that at all concerning?
I mean, I think it's something to watch. I guess I'm not too terribly concerned. It has been a pattern that we've seen in most of the exhibition games. I think the second one maybe was the Bellarmine game might have been the exception to that. But, I mean, I would agree with you. I thought that when and you tweeted this out a couple times, I mean, when they got into the lane against the zone, they would get pretty much whatever shot they wanted, and in the second half really did a great job of knocking those down. And so, from that standpoint, I think you're being aggressive there, but the kinds of shots that are getting out of that don't necessarily lead to getting fouled. And I thought some of the other fast break ones, they really just took it to the basket, and Austin Peay almost let him go. It wasn't a great position to foul. So I don't know that it's I'm not overly concerned with it, but certainly something to monitor as the competition steps up a little bit. I think IU was able to just really do whatever they wanted offensively, and if you take out some of the careless turnovers, this is probably a game IU scores 120. So in that regard, I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing, but definitely something to watch. Although I did think, we talked a little bit about Blackman. I thought he did a good job of not settling for jumpers and going to the basket. So when you think about what he did, and you think about Yogi really doing that, even Troy to some extent, driving in, looking to pass, I thought I don't have a whole lot of issue with that right now. But I do think it's something that you're gonna want to do to try to get guys in foul trouble. But Bryant did a decent job of that, trying to get post position. They called a few fouls there, as they did against Eastern Illinois. But I think nothing I'm frightened by at this point, but I think it's definitely worth watching as they start to get into a little bit tougher games.
Yeah, something else that we should keep an eye on is obviously IU's free throw percentage. Perhaps the reason why they don't want to go to the line is the fact that they're only shooting about 60% right now from the field in both games. They're 15 of 25 against Eastern Illinois and only 6 of 10 today. So obviously they're struggling here a little bit, at the line. So it might not be a bad thing that they weren't getting, all those calls.
Yeah, and this is a good free throw shooting team, so that doesn't concern me as much. I think this team will start making free throws when they count, and a small sample size, only 10 shots, sometimes just a couple misses makes it look worse. Ryan, you want to talk about the offense? Please do.
Yeah, I think that as you said, we were a little negative to start this, but the defense got brought up and there were concerns, and giving up 76 points to Austin Peay is, a concern. But at the same time, people should really appreciate what this team did offensively tonight. That was beautiful basketball. It just was. They just attacked. And what you saw that was really encouraging, and you mentioned it, and so did Andy, is that they were getting into the lane and kicking out for those threes. Rarely was it just three passes around the perimeter and a guy firing. It was movement. It was almost like poetry. It was just gorgeous. And the team also, was balanced. They had a great second half, but they had 51 points in the first half, 51 in the second half. It wasn't like they only played one half. The second half was almost perfect, but this was a balanced offensive effort. You had a lot of guys contributing. A guy like Bielfeldt, who we were expecting to be a contributor, but at times he was a really active part. He was almost in double figures. You had 5 guys in double figures. This was 2 guys over 20. This was an excellent effort, and they should be commended for their offense. The problem is that we know they're going to be good offensively. We want to see improvements in other areas. So I don't want to sound super negative with that rant about the defense, but at the same time, this was an excellent performance offensively. So we got to mention that.
Yeah, and I thought it was really nice to see Nick Zeisloff get going. He's a guy that hasn't really seemed to get in the flow of the game, through the first couple exhibition games and that first game. And I tweeted out before the game, he was my pick to click. I just thought he was due to go out there, make some threes, and he got some really good looks in the first half. He made one of them, missed a couple, and then, of course, got red hot in the second half and finished 5 for 7. And he's a really important component for this team. I think when Indiana plays the beautiful brand of basketball like they did tonight on the offensive end, Zeisloff is going to be getting looks, and he's going to be making them. And he's a really key piece for this team to be able to get production off the bench. And it was kind of nice to see him get going, just because we hadn't seen that yet. And I think he's going to be a key piece. Shoot, the guy was one of the most efficient offensive players in the entire country last season. I want to talk about Yogi some more too, who, look, 22 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds. I think at some point this year he might get a triple-double. It may happen because he just seems to be on that kind of a mission. Andy, you mentioned how he seems to be leading with defense, and I think between he, Robert Johnson, Colin Hartman, they really seem to be guys that are leading this team defensively, and which, again, we know that's going to be so important, and it's nice to see. Any other individual performances that stood out that you guys want to mention? Andy, anything notable that stood out to you?
I thought, just to touch on Yogi, talked about his defense, but I really thought offensively he was really in the flow of things tonight. It was 4 for 5 from 3, 4 for 5 from 2. I thought had a really good mix of taking the open shots on the outside when they were there, getting other guys involved, and getting to the rim. So aside from the 4 turnovers, which we probably don't need to beat that into the ground any more than we already have. I thought he was really fantastic. And I don't know that anybody else really stood out to me besides Zaislov, as you mentioned. I think this was really perfect, kind of game for him with the other team playing zone, guys getting in the lane and kicking out, and so I thought it was a kind of a good game script. Gets used a lot for football. I think this was probably a good game script for him from a basketball standpoint, the way he plays and what he brings to the table. So I thought both those guys played really well. Robert Johnson and Hartman, we talked about Hartman a bit already. I thought Robert Johnson did really well coming off the bench. Missed a few threes, kind of settled for a few threes, but then settled in pretty nicely. 7 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. Did have those 3 turnovers, but I thought overall he played well again. And I really I'll be interested to see, when we kind of talk starting lineup stuff, it went back to what it was in the exhibition games with Bielfeldt getting the start tonight. But I really thought in the second half, in the first half, when they first came in, the spark that Hartman and Johnson gave on the defensive end was really good. And it's kind of a role I like seeing those guys in. I think it helps manage Hartman's minutes a little bit. And so I'll be interested to see what happens with that, if that pendulum kind of keeps swinging back and forth as the season goes on. But I thought those were another couple guys who had some, maybe not as gaudy a stat line as Yogi, but both played really well.
Yeah, and Andy, by the way, something I've been tracking is that initial push when Robert Johnson and Colin Hartman come in, and it was 17-9 when Johnson came in. They immediately went on a 10-2 run. So pretty much every game we're seeing whatever the starters do, and it's usually okay. It's ratcheted up a notch with that bench, which is a really great sign and a good just a good habit for this team to get into. Will, you have something you want to mention?
Yeah, just looking here at Hartman's stats, I mean, we talked a little bit, in the last episode, but he was 0 for 4 from the line, against Eastern Illinois. I mean, from the field against Eastern Illinois, 0 points. And today he only had 2, 1 for 2, from the field. And I'm just curious if you guys are concerned maybe. I know he's not one of those guys who needs to score all the time, especially with, all the offensive firepower that we have. But is it still concerning to see him struggle early on?
That's a good question. And Ryan, I'd like for you to take this, because there was a moment tonight where Colin Hartman channeled his inner Will Sheehy and had a backdoor cut and a jam, and I know that you probably needed to take 5 to 10 minutes to yourself after that happened. So
it was only like 45 seconds. Let's not exaggerate. No, that was a beautiful back cut. Perfect. I actually sent out the hashtag Colin Hartman things when he did that. Finished with a dunk, which I don't think anybody in the arena or outside of it expected. But no, I'm not really concerned about him not scoring, because he's a guy who can impact a game so much without scoring. He's, as we've said, he's always in the right place defensively. He always keeps the offense moving. He will back cut like that, make the defense work, even if he's not scoring points. I mean, you'd love for him to have 10 points or whatever. Tonight he didn't need to score. The other night he didn't need to score. And so I 1 for 2, and he missed a 3, but he also didn't take any bad shots. So I think he's not really hurting you by not scoring on the offensive end, because he's not a black hole. He's not taking 10 shots that are all bad. So I'd rather have him, if he doesn't have a great look, move it along and cut and do what he needs to do on the offense, and then play good defense and be in the right position. So I think that his scoring isn't really how you're going to judge his games. You'd love for him to be scoring as well, but at the same time, it's not necessary for this team to win, and he can help in so many ways just by playing smart basketball, that I don't think it really is a concern right now.
Hey, Ryan, let me ask you a question about Thomas Bryant. Apex Hoosier in the chat, brought up a good point. And look, this is going to be a topic that gets discussed all year, and we know that from experience because it was discussed when Cody Zeller was here. It was discussed during Noah Vonleh's freshman year, and that is Indiana's usage of its prize big man down low. And I think when you look at Thomas Bryant tonight, he was really efficient. He was 5 of 6 from the field, and the only shot he missed was a wide-open 3 that he took early, that he can make that shot. So we're okay with him taking that. But 5 for 5 on shots inside the three-point line, and he didn't have any offensive rebounds tonight. So it's not like he was just picking up garbage. Like, a lot of those were back to the basket, get him the ball in the post, and he made a nice move. But he was 6th on the team in shot attempts. And I'm curious, Ryan, what do you think so far about how Indiana's utilizing him? Are we running enough sets to get it down to him? Are the guys focused enough on getting it down to him? Do you think Indiana can do more of it? What do you think about the way Indiana's using the guy that you affectionately call Tommy Buckets?
I think that as the season goes on. By the way, do you like that? Are you picking up? Are we going with that? Is everybody else going with that? Come on.
I don't know because buckets suggest a jump shooter to me, but we'll see.
Hey, look, came to me in a flash.
It's
I don't know.
creative. We'll give you that.
But no, I don't think that's something to worry about yet. Is his lack of shots? First of all, they're limiting his minutes because of his foot, and he's still coming back from that. So sometimes when you're limiting a guy a little bit, it's hard for him to get into the flow necessarily. But the fact that he's there and the option is there has more impact than even just getting him the ball because the defense has to account for him. Tonight, I mean, it's hard to complain about the offense tonight or during the opener because the offense ran so well. So I can't really say, oh, well, God, they should have slowed things down and gotten it into the post more. I can't be mad about that because running the way they were running, it worked great. I think his most valuable asset is going to be running the floor and scoring easy baskets that way. But, yeah, I mean, of course you'd like to see them, if they get stuck offensively, just dump it down into them. But they didn't really get stuck offensively tonight. At some point when he's, maybe halfway through the season, I'd like to see more, when he's used to playing college basketball a little bit. Yeah, I'd like to see more isolation sets for him with, Troy or Yogi on a wing with just Brian in the post and everything else cleared out. So I'd like that, but I'm not gonna complain if that's not happening now. I think that against teams with more big men and that they need to put more pressure on the inside. Yeah, I think they're gonna need to do that. But right now, I'm not really upset. They scored 102 points tonight, and he was 5 for 5 from the field, and they didn't feel a need to force it. So I'm cool with that.
Andy, question for you about Max Bielfeldt. We had a question about this in the chat. About him trying to do too much on offense. It's a theme that we've talked about through a couple of games. And actually, I had a moment on my notes here where I was getting ready. I said, settle down, Bielfeldt. He took 2 threes. One of them was wiped out by a foul, and then had another kind of crazy drive. And then he got a steal and a bucket on the very next play. So I have "Shut up, Jared" written really big in my notes. But I think it's still an important point to be made. Like, I like Bielfeldt's aggressiveness. I think he's helping on defense. He's doing a nice job on the offensive glass. But I have caught myself at least once in every single game so far, the 2 exhibitions in here, wondering if he's trying to do a little bit too much. And I'm kind of wondering when that's going to be reined in. Because, again, with a team that has so many options on offense, it's very rare that Max Bielfeldt's going to be anything higher than the 4th or 5th option on the floor. And I feel like sometimes he's pushing it maybe a little bit above that and almost getting too caught up in the offensive flow when there's better options. Are you still seeing that? I mean, or is this just something we still need to continue to track as we go against better competition?
Yeah, I think I had roughly the same thoughts, even though I didn't write them on paper or on the computer in front of me. But I was thinking the exact same thing. And I mean, that was kind of a gift wrapped, steal and basket for him on that play. That was a pretty poor pass given how closely he was playing the guy defensively out that far. But yeah, I thought the same thing, that just some of the shots just felt like they weren't necessarily in the flow, and like you said, it was more a case of just getting caught up in the excitement of how well the offense was running and things like that. I think the couple things that probably concerned me more than that with him tonight were 2 rebounds, and I really thought he struggled defensively as well. The Chris Horton on Austin Peay is a pretty good player for the Ohio Valley. I thought he had a really strong game. He ended up with 17 points and 12 rebounds, and I thought when Bryant went out in the first half with foul trouble, I thought he really worked over Bielfeldt pretty well. I think he's continued to struggle with some of the ball screen defense and what they want to do there a couple times, but yeah, I think I still have the same thoughts offensively, that I'm not sure. It certainly isn't the role that I envision him in, and maybe that's just me needing time for the reality of what's going on to mesh with what actually is going to happen. And if that doesn't match up with my kind of preconceived notion of how things would work out, then maybe that's not wrong. But I do think I've kind of struggled with that just because of what I guess I expected him to do, and some of the shots there coming within the flow. And I just think there's a lot of other guys that I would rather see shooting 3-pointers or 18-foot jumpers on this team.
Yeah, I just want to kind of jump in here, and we need to remind everybody this has been 2 games, 2 exhibitions. guys are still fitting into this team. We're really kind of, everyone's sort of feeling their way through with it. So if a guy's a little off offensively or doesn't really know his role yet or is still kind of, it's early. That stuff's going to get figured out. What we really should focus on is, as far as that goes, if it's the start of the Big Ten season and they still don't know their roles and then that's a problem. Right now, guys are kind of in these awkward games where they're supposed to blow people out. If they're taking shots that maybe they shouldn't, or if guys are just kind of looking out of sorts offensively or defensively, or the freshmen are playing like freshmen, I don't think that's something to get concerned about. I think we need to remember where we are in the season and where the projection is to go. So these guys are going to rack up bad tape early in the season. And the point of that is that you watch the tape, you learn from it, you move on, and you get better. So really, it's, again, I know we got to look for things to talk about, but it's hard to really complain about where they're at right now just because it's so new and it's so awkward. So a guy like Max, who just joined the team, a few months ago, not knowing his role is pretty normal, and I think that we should really just hope that he kind of figures it out quickly.
By the way, I see there's a conversation in the chat going on about Nick Zeislov's dislocated finger. Is there anybody better at handling a situation like that than Tim Garl? His expression doesn't change. He's just, that man has seen it all. Popping a finger in, whatever, popping a separated shoulder back in. Tim Garl can do it all. Anyway, I want to make a quick comment about Juwan Morgan and OG Anunoby. And I know, they didn't get a ton of minutes tonight. Will, what did you have here? That's 7 and 9 minutes between the two of them, something like that. Here's my comment about those two guys. We remember OG from the Eastern Illinois game. He played a big part in that run at the end of the first half. What I really like about those two guys, and watch this during the game, they play really low defensively. They just naturally have low defensive stances. Contrast that with Troy and James some of the times. And I really think that part of the problem that James and Troy have is simply they don't play in a low stance naturally. And that gets them into trouble because it's almost like they have to think about it to do it. Whereas Juwan and OG just constantly play like that. And I sometimes find myself thinking, don't watch the example of some of your upperclassmen. Keep your good habits. Because I think that's something that's really going to bode well for them when they can match their fundamentals with the awareness of what needs to happen. Because they still find themselves out of position some and that kind of thing. But, Ryan, I see you nodding. You agree with that regarding OG and Juwan? And hopefully that leads to them being able to contribute 5 to 10 solid minutes per game this year.
Yeah, no, I really like what I see from both guys as far as fundamentals go, a willingness to work. I thought Juwan kind of got out of sorts. I thought he's kind of compounded mistakes tonight. But, again, freshman in his second game, that's going to happen. He cruised in there and just kind of made a mistake, then made another mistake, then kind of mess something up, and so that happens. Freshman, second game, playing at Assembly Hall. He was a nervous kid, I'm sure. But I really like the fundamentals I see with those guys, and with OG, he's so athletic, it's insane. But a lot of times with athletic guys, you don't have that fundamental sense of what you're supposed to be doing, and he's throwing backdoor passes. He's low in his stance. He's where he's supposed to be defensively. I think he rebounds well. He blocks guys out. So you really have to love what he has shown so far, even in a small sample size. And then that almost having that tip dunk tonight at the end was outrageous. And off balance around the back of the rim, couldn't get it in, just pulled it down. Just bounced right up and dunked it again. He's fun to watch too. So those guys may not be huge impact players this year, but they're gonna play, and the fact that they play so fundamentally and have so much natural talent is really promising to see.
Andy, I didn't notice this myself as much tonight, but it was mentioned in the chat, and even Heather mentioned this while we were watching. Just that she mentioned when Yogi's off the floor, the team just seems a little bit out of sorts. And I'm curious, I know you mentioned in our chat that there were a couple of odd lineups tonight. Did you notice that the team seemed to struggle a little bit with Yogi out, and what were some of these odd lineups that you saw?
Yeah, I'll be curious to do the lineup analysis tonight because there was one time in particular, and I forget whether Yogi was the guard out there, but they had Hartman, Troy, Bielfeldt, and Bryant, or some combination, like four big guys, at least on a couple occasions. One of them was toward the end of the game when they were just kind of emptying the bench, and Diego was the only guard out there. But there was another time in the first, I think it was the first half or maybe early in the second, when they had that lineup, and I forget whether Yogi was the guard or not. But I thought that was definitely interesting to me to to try to look at some of those kinds of things. And I do think it's still a little bit of a work in progress without him. I think Robert Johnson has done a decent job of being a ball handler for this team, but he's also done it at times when Yogi was still on the floor. So there's still kind of that security blanket or whatever you want to say out there when that's going on. But I think they're just, the hard thing is there's nobody else that has the same skill set as Yogi when you think of it that way. So in terms of what we talked about earlier with, setting people up and setting people up, but also knowing kind of when to score and pick his spots and things like that. I just don't think there's anybody that has the experience that can kind of bring that to the table. And so I do think that's still a little bit of a work in progress. And I think the reality is that in most Big Ten games, he's probably going to play 34, 35 minutes a game. So I don't know how much they'll need to deal with that. But I do think it's important to keep Blackman and Robert Johnson out there when Yogi's off the floor. I think having both those guys and kind of the working in tandem can help mitigate a little bit of Yogi not being out there. I think those are the kinds of things that will be important, and it's probably a worthwhile thing to look at. I'll try to pay maybe particular attention to that as I do the lineup stuff tonight, just to see if there's anything that sticks out without him on the floor.
Will, you have an interesting stat and post-game press conference anecdote.
Yeah, an interesting stat is going to be average, time of possession. Last game it was 17 seconds, and now it's dropped down to 13. So obviously they're playing crazy fast. It actually helped the team get 10 extra possessions tonight, which obviously it's going to help you on the scoreboard, and probably the less time that the defense is not playing, probably the better. And another, antidote from postgame is a little bit on Troy's leadership. After the game, Crean was talking about Troy and said that he stopped practice multiple times last week to talk to his teammates, about different points, just about strategy and all that good stuff. So I want to throw this over to whoever wants it. I know we saw him kind of, pull Bryant away and kind of talk to him a little bit today. So have you seen a growth in Troy's leadership?
Yeah, I think with Troy, I think we're starting to see him be a more vocal leader. I'd like to see with Troy, he always leads by example with effort. You just want to see him start to lead by example with the defensive awareness. And, so I think that's the key. But it's nice to see him taking a vocal role with the young guys. I think that's good. I think that's his natural progression, going from a sophomore to a junior, being an upperclassman who's been around. To see that. Ryan, you noticing anything with Troy's leadership?
Only what I've heard. And it's that, after this offseason, with so much turmoil, that several guys have been counted on to lead, and Troy has been one of the guys that I've been hearing that is trying to step into that, fill that void. Will it continue? Is it just for show, or is it actually a thing? I hope it is. I think it's important that these guys have people to look up to. I think a guy like Derek Elston's influence on these guys is going to be very important as well, because he can tell them, hey, this is your step up right here. This is where you need to step into the leadership role and stop practice, or this is your turn to do this, or and really guide those guys and help them develop their leadership. So hopefully it is a sign of things to come, and this team needs people to call others out when things are wrong and to fix things. So that's it's positive to see, and let's hope he keeps it up.
Well, Andy, we have come to the part of the show where we like to look ahead at Indiana's next opponent, and obviously Indiana's next opponent. By the way, how weird is it? This was officially the first game of the Maui Invitational. I didn't even realize that, but apparently this is like the official first game. But it wouldn't have made a difference if we'd lost, right? Like that stuff is all set in stone.
It's supposed to be like a showcase thing. Yeah,
No.
They said something before the game that they gave like lays to Crean and the coach of Austin Peay. I'm like, yeah, that's really great for Austin Peay. Hi, here's a lay. You don't get to go to Hawaii, but here's a lay. Congratulations. You're in the Maui Invitational. Well done.
Yes. So awkwardly, between the first round of the Maui Invitational and Maui is the Gavitt tip-off games, and Indiana is playing in this against Creighton. Now, this obviously isn't Creighton with Doug McDermott. Andy, what can we expect from this Creighton team that is coming into Assembly Hall? And is it Creighton that is redshirting like their top freshman?
I'm not really sure. I looked a little bit about them this afternoon. So they've only played one game so far. They beat Texas Southern, so they did beat a team with IU ties since Mike Davis is the coach there. So they beat them by 23 over the weekend. They play tomorrow night actually against UT San Antonio, and then they'll head to Bloomington after that. So they had a freshman score 18 points and lead them in scoring in their first game. So I'm not sure if he is the one. There's another guy who they talked about that they really like that's got a foot injury. So I don't know if he might be one that they end up redshirting. But so they've got that. They've got an interesting mix of some guys who returned last year. Nobody that was, I don't think, any double-digit scorers, but a couple guys that scored close to 10 points a game. But then they've also got a couple transfers, one from Nevada and one from Boston University. So the guy from Boston University is their starting point guard. He averaged, what I write down here, about 13.7 assists for Boston, and then had 10.7 assists in their first game. So I think it'll be a good matchup between he and Yogi. They shot a decent number of threes in the first game, so it'll be interesting to see that you know how IU defends some of those situations, because they did struggle with some of those pick and pop plays against Eastern Illinois at the beginning of the second half. So they've got I think it's Isaiah Zierden. No, that's not him. Huff is the guy's last name. He's the Nevada transfer, so he's 6'8" and hit a couple threes in the first game. So I think those kinds of things will be interesting. They only shot 10 of 28 from three in their first game, so they shot a lot. They didn't necessarily shoot them well, but they shot well overall from the floor. Had 22 assists on 38 makes. So I think it'll be a pretty good test. They took a trip, I forget where it was to, in the offseason, but I think, similar to what IU did last year when they went to Canada, I think in large part because they had so many new players. They've got a number of freshmen in those transfers I mentioned. So by most people, they're picked in the 7 to 8 range in the Big East. So a little bit hard to tell in the team kind of in its current construct. We don't have a lot of last year's stuff to look back on, but they played fairly well against Texas Southern in the opener, but did give up 70 points there. So I would imagine the game will be relatively high scoring if that's an indication of their defense, and we know what IU's has been. So I definitely, by a wide margin, the biggest test that IU will have had coming into, before they head into Maui. So I think it'll be a good test. It'll be interesting to see how they defend, because they do have some, like I said, some big guys that can step out and shoot threes. So it'll be interesting to see how well Bielfeldt and Bryant and those guys, play in that scenario.
Yeah, Justin Patton was the number 40 recruit in his redshirting. I wonder how many other recruits ranked that highly have redshirted their freshman year, especially at a school like Creighton, which doesn't get a lot of recruits that high. Interesting, but I guess he's kind of a slight guy, so they want him to get in the weight room. And Ryan, you mentioned they had a closed-door scrimmage against someone and apparently blew the doors off of them.
Yeah, I heard something about that. They matched up with somebody for a closed-door preseason scrimmage and just dominated them, but I don't know the circumstances behind that, but somebody told me that and just said, yeah, no, Creighton's a pretty good team, so better than they're being projected. So
interesting. And one recruiting note real quick before we go into our final thoughts is that Bruce Brown, whose recruitment has been somewhat confusing. Indiana's been on him for a while. Then he announced that he wasn't going to sign during the fall signing period, where just today came out and said that he was down to his final two, Indiana and Miami, and that he's announcing on Wednesday. So there is, and a lot of people seem to feel good about Bruce Brown. Again, he's a guy Indiana's been recruiting for a long time. We saw that with Deron Davis, that relationship can have a really big impact. When it comes to a guy deciding between you and you've built a relationship with him and a school that's kind of come on late, like Mississippi State did with Deron Davis and like the University of Miami apparently has done with Bruce Brown. But he will announce Wednesday, and he's I think ranked 30th by the list I saw today, a 4-star guy, kind of a combo guard type. I watched a little bit of tape of him today. Very, very athletic, really able to finish. I think his shot is a little bit questionable, but a guy who really brings defensive intensity from the lead guard spot, which is big. And so we'll see, if you can put him together with Curtis Jones and Deron Davis, that would give Indiana 3 4-star guys, plus Grant Gilon, who can kind of come in and fill that spot-up shooter role. Be a really nice class for Tom Crean, so we'll await that announcement on Wednesday. Well, with that said, gentlemen, I think we can wrap this show up. Let's go around the horn, get a few final thoughts, and we will start with you, Mr. DeWitt.
All right, so some of my final thoughts is, I really like how this team spreads the ball around. I mean, last game, 6 people hit, double figures in terms of scoring. Today, 5. Just keep passing the ball around. All the assists today. I mean, if you just keep passing that ball around, you're going to find an open look. And more than likely, I mean, if they shoot like they did tonight, they're going to make it. So that's what I'm hoping to see, moving forward.
Beautiful. Mr. Bottoms, your final thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what we said the other night, another win, nobody got hurt. We learn a little bit more about this team every game. I think some of the things we learned tonight are exciting, and some of the things are a little scary. But as we go through the season, I think we'll just see, more of that and get a better sense of, who the real defensive identity of this team ends up being. And I think, to the point made earlier, Thursday's game is going to be at least our best chance at this point to see that before they head to Maui. But certainly offensively, tonight had everything that makes you excited about this team. And so I guess if there's, if you want to take the glass half full approach, look back at that stretch in the second half where the offense was just humming and every shot was going in, but every shot was going in part because they were all great shots. And so just to kind of circle back to the point about the defense, that's why I think we all honed in so much on the negative, because we see the potential of what this team could be. But also see the potential for the defense to undermine that a bit. So, I don't know that we know a lot more tonight than we did before, other than that everybody's healthy. Nick Zaislov shoots really well after his finger is bent in a not normal direction, and everybody's pretty healthy and ready to go for Thursday night.
Hey, Brian, how excited were you when you saw that Wisconsin lost their opener?
Oh, God. So excited. At home. Like, did they actually call more than 3 fouls on Wisconsin? Did it? But my final thought is that a week from today, Indiana will be playing in the best preseason basketball tournament in the country, and I will be there. I am very excited for that. Luckily, we won in the first round tonight, to secure our place in Maui. But really, I'm just excited to see how this team progresses. I think that we're seeing, as Andy said, this team offensively is a juggernaut, but it's, adding to last year. We were already really good offensively last year, and then adding pieces that can really help you this year too. The key is going to be defensively, and hopefully against Creighton they show up, play some defense, and that carries over into the first round in Maui, because those games in Maui that's the start of the season for me. I think Creighton is too. Creighton's not going to be an easy game. And it's going to be nice, RPI-wise, to get a team like that on your, if we can beat them, get them on your schedule. But in Maui, that's going to be a great opportunity that'll pay dividends later in the season if this team can play well and play focused and keep its head and not, be worried about being out in the sun, but actually, play some basketball and come in fired up and beat these guys, so beat those teams. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited to see how this team does again. I mean, there's so much good about this team and so much potential there, just like Andy said, that, it's really fun to watch, and hopefully, they ratchet it down defensively and just keep that unbelievable offense humming.
It is. It's fun to watch, and we need to enjoy this team. That's the one thing. We can get caught up in the expectations and wanting this team so badly to fulfill its potential and be the team that makes the big deep March run and competes for Big Ten title and all of this. And we want that so badly because we know this team is capable of it. But, one thing I think we've always prided ourselves on at the Assembly Call is really stepping back and enjoying each victory and enjoying the journey each season, And so I know tonight, there were some moments of criticism for a defense that we know can get better, because we know as the season goes on, that is going to dictate what this team's ceiling is. But my goodness, was that a breathtaking display of offense in the second half. And I think we've all, as a fan base, got to be careful to balance our criticisms and wanting everything to be perfect with really remembering just how great this team can be, especially on the offensive end. Really enjoy that because tonight it was it was really a beautiful thing to watch, and it was nice seeing the present and the future of Indiana basketball play so well. A senior in Yogi Ferrell who really led, had a terrific game all around, and then a guy like Thomas Bryant who in certain moments when Indiana really needed a lift and someone to step up and make a play, he did it, and so nice to see, and I think it bodes well for this team moving forward, and we'll find out a lot more Thursday night against Creighton. Well, thank you for listening, for watching this episode of the Assembly Call. Make sure you get on our email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe, so that you can get our post-game analysis emails. We send them out the morning after every game. You want to make sure that you are on that list. And with that said, everybody have a great night or a great day. If you're listening to this on the podcast, we will talk to you Thursday night after IU Creighton. See you soon, everybody.